Good afternoon. The lights are on, which means I must be on. So thanks for firstly coming to the last session of the day. When I saw the timetable I had for today and realised that I delivered this session 20 minutes ago in the room over there and then I had to come over here and do it, I thought that room will be packed, and then they put me in the big room last and it'll be empty because everyone was crammed into that one. It's kind of not panned out, but it's nearly there. But thanks for hanging on till the bitter end. Hope it's been a useful day. I'm going to spend approximately 40-45 minutes. I've got no excuses in this room because I've got a big clock down here that's telling me already how long I've been speaking for, to talk to you about virtualization and business continuity. So as it says on the slides up there, my name's Lee Dilworth. I'm Principal System Engineer for Northern Europe, which basically means I cover everything in the core data center, so storage, networking, disaster recovery, backup. So we're just going to go through how VMware addresses business continuity, take a look at considerations for DR, and then we're going to move into taking a closer look at Site Recovery Manager, and then just finish off with some quick next steps. So if we kind of take a look at the big picture and kind of the one of the drivers in the past for moving to a virtual platform. Those of you in the room might already have VMware. You might have hundreds, thousands of virtual machines. Some people sitting here might have none and just have physical boxes still. So as we're getting kind of more pressure to work 365, 24/7, the impact on the RTOs, the SLAs that the business put on you as the IT team or the CIO or whatever your role is, those pressures are doing nothing but increasing. And if I think back to the start of my career when I used to spend all my time working on IBM AIX when I worked for IBM, and then back then we used to look in wonder at people that ran production workloads on Windows, and then kind of wind forward 15 years and see where we are now. And now the x86 infrastructure that in the past, years ago was never classed as mission critical is now suddenly mission critical, running thousands of applications of all different types, whether that be Linux, Windows, Solaris x86, whatever you're running. So the focus has shifted dramatically in the last few years on providing a resilient x86-based infrastructure. So if we just build this slide out, first, what you need, what is important when you're looking at a virtualization platform to ensure that you have some stability. So if we look at, you take the base components, ESX, the hypervisor, that is essentially the foundation of your data center. And I know there's a lot of things in the press saying hypervisors are commodity now, and why should we buy one hypervisor over another? What are the differences? Well, fundamentally, it's the foundation that you lay that you build everything else on top of. So if the hypervisor isn't solid, if it doesn't scale well, if it can't handle situations like HA, fault tolerance, site loss, then are you really going to trust it to be the backbone of your DR infrastructure? The second thing that you want to look for is obviously you want to be independent of the physical infrastructure. So when you look at virtual machines, by their very nature, if you've not virtualized anything yet, this is one of the key things to start to grasp, especially when you go back to talk to your own businesses about why moving to virtualization is something you should be considering. So virtual machines, by their very nature, are hardware independent, immediately lends itself to being very flexible for DR and business continuity. If we then take a look at some of the features we'll talk about today, it's also key that when you're putting these things in, you want these properties of high availability, fault tolerance, DR. You want these to be attributes of the infrastructure, not something you have to go and configure for every single virtual machine that you create, because that will just basically create a management headache and doesn't really advance you much from where you might be with the physical world today. And the second thing is you want to be able to protect against different kinds of downtime. So you'll see today that there are things you can do basically to completely eliminate planned downtime events that you might have to suffer at the moment. And then there are obviously things that you can put in to very much help and aid unplanned downtime, so the things that you can't control, so we go through those as well. And I've been speaking to all kinds of people today down on the stand, everybody from customers that have 2 or 3 physical boxes and they want to try virtualization for the first time, so some existing customers that I know that already have hundreds of ESX boxes and thousands of virtual machines. And the point is, when you move to virtualization, there's something in this for everyone, whether you're at the far left-hand side of this picture or whether you're at the far right-hand side. So if you I think about when I started at VMware 5 years ago, and I used to do P2V projects as a consultant, even by just virtualizing an old NT operating system, for example, and putting it inside a piece of brand new hardware that was running the VMware platform, you've intrinsically made that machine now more highly available. And I used to get quizzed by project managers who would say, well, how can you prove that? And then I just basically turn them around and show them that the white compact box that was covered in Post-it notes saying don't power off is now that operating system that was on there with that application that's been running for years and nobody really knows what it does is now sitting on the shiny new box over here that is fully supported by the hardware vendor, and they can actually buy parts for it if it ever goes wrong. So even by just doing basic commodity virtualization, you can start to make your infrastructure more highly available. And as you move up through the stack, we'll see that there are obviously more advanced things that you can do with the virtualization layer to give you extra layers of protection within the data center itself before you have to even think about DR and business continuity and fail into a site. So we'll cover those off today as well, and we'll go through each of the features at the bottom there. We'll cover those off individually. So, still when you look at surveys, this one's from 2008, and I dare say the 2009, 2010 surveys wouldn't basically change too much here. It's still, business continuity in DR is still one of the big drivers for people moving to virtualization, to make that part of their business easier, more robust, more dependable, more reliable. It still gets to the top of most of the surveys that we conduct. And the important thing to mention is, when you look at what you can do with the VMware platform, the basic constructs of a virtual data center give you levels of availability that previously with physical boxes would actually involve a bit of work. So things on the far left, basic component redundancy. You think about doing storage, failover, multipathing, NIC teaming in an operating system physically. You have to install potentially 2 HBA cards per box, 2 NIC cards per box. You have to configure NIC teaming software per box. And you have to do that for every single box that you deploy. Now, when you deploy a virtual platform, you build that availability into the infrastructure. So essentially, once it's in the base layer, everything that you drop in on top of it, the virtual machines, they benefit from that layer underneath without having to configure something individually in every virtual machine. So you're essentially simplifying the model that you're putting in. So all of these elements of protection become a behavioral capability of the data center rather than something that has to be bespokely configured for every application and operating system that you deploy. And that'd be if you go and look at an existing customer, or you might have a friend at a company that has VMware, you go in and take a look at his virtual machines, and you say, oh, how come all your virtual machines just have one network card? Surely that's a bit dangerous, isn't it? What happens if the network card goes down? Well, A, it's a virtual network card, not a physical one, and B, he's already built network failover into the base foundation, so he doesn't need multiple network cards in his virtual machine to cope with network outages. The failover will happen at the back end on the data center layer. You then move up into the kind of the more, the features that you kind of hear about a little bit more, so fault tolerance, HA, DRS. So we'll talk about those individually, so I'm not going to cover them off now. But these kind of features will help you protect against local data center outages. And they can be simple things like, the server fails, the blade's crashed, the blade enclosure's gone down. The CE came in to upgrade the fabric, and he upgraded, one switch, not the other one. We need to move everything to the other side of the environment, the other data center. We need to put everything in a different chassis. How can we get things over there live without an outage? All of these features will go through, and they take care of planned downtime, planned events. Things like storage vMotion, the ability to migrate a VM from one array to another without actually taking the virtual machine down. So all of these things help you eliminate planned downtime. Once you're into the kind of, the realms of, virtualizing and doing, all these kind of things, the one thing that doesn't magically go away is obviously backup. So VMware data recovery, solutions from, third-party vendors to integrate with our, VMware consolidated backup framework, they can all be implemented on a virtualization platform to essentially give you 24/7 backup windows. And then at the far right, the worst case scenario, if you have to fail to another site, or maybe you fail to the other site because it's a planned failover because you have some situation developing that causes you want to fail over, then this is where SRM starts to come into the picture, Site Recovery Manager.